It's kind of wild how a single moment can just completely change your path. Then, boom, this massive book of fire regulations hits his desk, and he just quits on the spot. That instant nope moment, well, it sends him down this completely unexpected road. And somehow that leads him to becoming this really key voice on UAP.
It is fascinating, isn't it, that seemingly everyday frustration turns into something, well, pretty extraordinary. It kind of shows you sometimes those moments of, I can't do this, can actually unlock something huge.
Absolutely. And that's exactly what we're digging into today. We're unpacking Ryan Gray's presentation at the Yale Student UFO Society. You shared this transcript with us, and it's just a goldmine, a chance to really get into his firsthand experiences, as a Navy fighter pilot encountering these UAPs. Let's set aside the really out there theories for a bit. We're focusing on what he and his squadron actually saw, what it means for national security, aviation safety, and the work he's doing right now in this field.
Yeah, and connecting it to the bigger picture, Ryan's accounts are just invaluable. These aren't just stories, right? This is coming from a highly trained observer, someone using incredibly sophisticated tech. Understanding his experience helps you, the listener, move past the speculation. It grounds the whole conversation in, well, real-world events.
Exactly. And the core source for this deep dive is that Yale transcript, Ryan Graves himself speaking. So, our mission for you today is simple. Really grasp these firsthand accounts from a credible military source. We want you to understand the complexities here way beyond the clickbait headlines and learn about the push for transparency, for actual research. Think of this as your shortcut to getting genuinely up to speed. So where do we even kick this off? How do we start unpacking his story?
Well, I think the Gimbal video is a pretty logical starting point. It really pushed this whole topic into the public consciousness, and it's important for you to understand Ryan's specific role because there's often some confusion there.
Right. He was very clear about that. He did not film the Gimbal video. That was a friend, another pilot in his squadron, VF-11 Red Rippers, and they were flying the FA-18Fs. Those are the two-seaters, correct? Pilot up front, WSO in the back.
That's right, weapons systems officer in the back seat. And this wasn't just some casual flight. This happened during a workup cycle for deployment. So these pilots are in the middle of intense, very realistic training.
And when they got that footage, the reaction wasn't just, that's weird.
Yeah.
Graves said he went straight to the debrief space, and they showed the radar data, the video, to the admiral, the intel officers, right then and there. That tells you something about how serious it was taken, even immediately.
Precisely. Now, thinking about that moment, showing the video, the reactions, what really stood out to you as significant from his telling?
Well, Graves mentioned the WSO, the weapons systems officer. It's like he's watching this thing move in ways that just defy known physics, impossible kinematics. And he actually asks if the LNS was active. For you listening, LNS is launch and steer. He was basically asking, is our weapon locked onto this thing?
And that raises a really crucial point, doesn't it? How this object was perceived in real time by trained military personnel. The fact that a seasoned WSO even thought about a weapon lock. It shows how unusual the behavior was, and maybe, even for a second, a potential threat assessment.
Yeah, thankfully it wasn't locked. Greed's kind of joked, glad we didn't fire on them. He did say they probably had live ordnance being in workups, but firing on some random unidentified object, absolutely not. Safety protocols wouldn't allow it. But the video's impact, as you know, was massive. It became a huge part of this modern UAP transparency movement. That 2017 New York Times piece featured it heavily.
Oh, that NYT article was definitely a watershed moment. No question. It took these kinds of encounters out of the fringe corners and put them right into the mainstream conversation. Largely because of credible stuff like what was in that video.
Okay, so Gimbal sets the stage. But Ryan's Yale talk really dove much deeper into his own encounters, the squadron's experiences. This was, late 2012 to mid-2014? What were the key things happening then that you should be aware of?
Right. So when they got back from deployment on the USS Enterprise, their jets, the FA-18s, got upgraded radar systems. And this upgrade turned out to be pretty significant because suddenly they started picking up new radar contacts in their operating area, off Virginia Beach, contacts the older radar just hadn't seen.
The first thought is probably glitches, right? New system, maybe some bugs.
Exactly. That's the logical first step. But then, and this is critical for you to understand how their thinking shifted, other sensors started backing it up. The EO, the RR, the RF systems on the jets, They all started confirming the position of these same objects. EO is electro-optical, like a powerful camera. IR is infrared, heat signatures. RF is radio frequency emissions, this multi-sensor confirmation. It kind of forced them to accept these were likely real physical things.
And not just blips on a screen. Graves talked about trying to visually ID these stationary objects their sensors were tracking. They'd fly close, slow down. Their helmet display would even put a box in the sky where it should be. But often, nothing there. Like the object just wasn't visible when they got close, or it moved.
Which suggests some pretty advanced capabilities, doesn't it? Maybe stealth, maybe some kind of manipulation of how they appear. Definitely not typical behavior for any aircraft we know about.
But then things got really serious. A near mid-air collision. Two jets from Graves' squadron, flying close formation, maybe 150 feet apart. And one of these objects passes incredibly close within 50 feet of the lead jet's wing. For you to picture that, in aviation terms, that is dangerously, frighteningly close.
50 feet at speed. Yeah, that's way too close for comfort. And the pilot's reaction, just raw and immediate. I almost hit one of those fucking things. That really hits home how sudden and threatening it felt.
And at first, this wasn't even officially brief, just pilots talking, squadron scuttlebutts. But after a call that close, the safety officer had to step in. An official hazard report was filed. That triggered an investigation. And that's when they got that first concrete description. A dark gray or black cube inside of a clear sphere. Size estimated between 5 and 15 feet across. That's a very specific and very weird description.
It really is. And Graves emphasized the impossible ways these things moved. They saw them completely stationary in winds up to 120 knots. Think about that. An FA-18 would be tossed around like crazy in that kind of wind. They also saw them moving at 0.4 to 0.6 Mach. That's like 250, 350 knots.
Wow.
Flying in circles, racetrack patterns, changing heading and altitude constantly. Even briefly hitting supersonic speeds, Mach 1.1, 1.2. Seeing one object do all that, it's baffling. It's beyond known aerial tech.
And the safety investigation found something even more worrying. 4 other unreported near misses in their squadron. Just in the previous month and a half, pilots weren't reporting because, well, they didn't know what they were seeing and they feared the stigma. Sound familiar? That's a huge problem for flight safety.
Oh, absolutely. That stigma, both cultural and institutional, is a massive barrier. Pilots are rightly worried about their careers, about being seen as unreliable. It prevents getting a clear picture of how often this happens and how risky it might be.
So the squadron briefed their CO, their commanding officer, probably expected it to go up the chain. But it sounds like not much came back down. They basically just made an informal call to try and avoid these things during training. Which, okay, practically, maybe makes sense. They've got a mission. Chasing mystery objects isn't efficient use of a fighter jet.
But it highlights that tension, right, between the immediate job and the bigger need to understand a potential threat. Avoiding them might lower the immediate risk, sure, but it doesn't answer the fundamental questions. What are they? Where are they from? What are they doing here?
Then, the encounters keep happening. During another workup cycle, this time off Jacksonville, Florida, USS Theodore Roosevelt, same kinds of objects, still there, and it turned out Graves didn't even know at the time, but there were dozens of incidents involving aircraft off the carrier.
Yeah, that wider pattern across different locations, different carrier groups. It suggests this wasn't just isolated weirdness. It points to something more widespread happening in these military operating areas.
And this brings us back to those famous videos, Go Fast and Gimbal. Graves gave some really important context you might not know. The Go Fast video. That single object was actually in a line abreast formation with 4 others way out at sea, 15,000 feet. And he stressed the pilots never said it was going fast. That was someone else's interpretation later. What was weird was the formation and being hundreds of miles offshore.
The logistics of that are just puzzling. Maintaining a formation like that, so far from land, 1,000-mile round trip for maybe a short observation. That's like incredibly inefficient for anything conventional.
And Gimbal, again, he reiterated, larger object, followed by formation of 4 to 6 smaller ones, matched what they'd seen before. But the maneuvers, that's what was truly mind-blowing. The formation does this jumbled, chaotic turn, then instantly reforms.
Yeah.
And the gimbal object itself, it pulls an instantaneous reversal, a vertical U-turn in maybe 200 feet of airspace.
And just to put that 200 feet in perspective for you listening, an FA-18 needs thousands of feet to make a turn like that, maybe 3,500 to 6,000 feet. So an object doing that tight instant reversal, it suggests propulsion control systems operating on a whole different level than ours.
He also mentioned the fuel needed for that kind of move. A tight vertical U-turn like that just burns through fuel. It's incredibly inefficient. So for something already operating way out at sea, it raises huge questions about its endurance. What's its power source? What's its goal?
Right. It implies either an incredibly advanced, efficient power source we don't understand, or maybe a very short operational time. Neither really fits neatly with known aviation tech.
And after these encounters, the air crews would debrief, right? They'd reference the SA page. That's the situational awareness display. It shows radar, sensor data in real time. So there was electronic data backing up what they were seeing, visually or with other systems. But the official response from higher ups, basically nothing. They were just told, essentially, shut up about it.
That instruction to keep quiet, it likely played a huge role in the underreporting and hampered any real understanding within the Navy back then. It really underlines how powerful that stigma, that cultural pressure really was.
It's almost hard to believe. You learned later the admiral, after being briefed on all this, apparently sent an email up the chain to Major Command expressing serious concern, even floating the idea of canceling training missions. That's huge. It shows just how seriously leadership took the operational impact of these things.
Considering canceling training for an entire carrier strike group getting ready for deployment, that is a monumental decision. It speaks volumes about the perceived gravity of the situation at the highest levels involved.
So Graves finishes his tour, becomes an instructor pilot, kind of puts it behind him. Until 2017, New York Times drops those videos. And for him, it's a wait a second moment. He hears his buddies' voices on the audio, realizes this whole issue still isn't being taken seriously. What did he do next after that realization?
Well, that was a real turning point for Ryan. He realized that what they'd experienced, this potential intel gap, maybe an unknown adversary, it just wasn't being dealt with. He called it a cry for help that had basically been ignored.
So he started reaching out, talking to other pilots, East Coast, West Coast, and found out, yeah, they were still seeing this stuff, same kinds of objects, same issues. The official response was still just kind of, be careful out there. Then he talks to other instructors, guys from different squadrons, and maybe half of them recognized the descriptions, cubes inside spheres, like it was almost normal. But nobody talked about it openly, that whole reputation thing in aviation.
And that consistency is key, isn't it? Across different squadrons, different coasts over time. It really argues against this just being isolated misidentifications by one unit. And those recurring specific descriptions, cubes and spheres, that's particularly compelling data.
Now that's when he decided he had to speak out, publicly. Felt a responsibility, especially after that near miss, to prevent something catastrophic. So he took a huge step. He briefed the Senate Armed Services Committee.
Yeah, going directly to the Senate Armed Services Committee, sharing his firsthand story. That was pivotal. It put the issue right in front of the lawmakers responsible for national security oversight, for funding.
And it clearly made a difference. It fed into this growing congressional focus we've seen over the last, 5 years? Then, as his story got out there, podcast reports started flooding in. From other military pilots, commercial pilots, even astronauts, other credible observers. He mentioned they've documented over 800 reports now.
That sheer volume, plus the credibility of the people reporting, it's more strong evidence. This isn't just a few weird incidents. It seems to be a widespread phenomenon needing serious attention. And getting reports from astronauts, that adds a whole other layer of validation.
All this led him to formalize things. He co-founded Americans for Safe Aerospace, a nonprofit actively working with Congress on legislation. And he stressed, this isn't just military airspace. Commercial pilots, they're reporting encounters almost daily. Some are so shaken up they're apparently drug testing themselves voluntarily just to cover their own backs.
The potential risk to commercial aviation safety is really serious. Unexpected encounters can cause confusion, dangerous evasive maneuvers, potentially leading to accidents. The fact that experienced pilots feel they need to drug test themselves, that shows the level of stress and uncertainty this stuff causes.
He's also working with scientific groups, the FBI and the American Institute of Aeronautics and Astronautics. Let's talk about that AIAA involvement. He actually founded and chairs their UAP Integration Outreach Committee. What's that committee doing?
Well, the AIA committee is acting as this crucial bridge, between the established aerospace engineering world and this emerging UAP study field. They're doing quite a bit, organizing paper sessions, panels at big industry conferences, trying to foster open, professional discussion, and initiating projects focused on the hard technical side. detection, characterization, evaluation, looking at optical sensing, passive radar, hyperspectral analysis, radar analytics, even looking at using existing computer power on military gear to reanalyze old raw radar data. It's about bringing real scientific rigor to the table.
Sounds very data-driven, very scientific, which fits Gray's whole approach, right? He kept saying, for him, this isn't about belief, it's about observation. Seeing things you can't explain, and then rigorously looking for data to understand what's happening.
Exactly. He really hammers that point. Move past anecdotes, focus on generating data, both soft data, collecting credible witness accounts systematically, and hard data through applying technical scientific methods. And his background as a fighter pilot gives him this very pragmatic, security-first view, especially on the national security side. Unidentified objects operating with impunity in controlled airspace. That's a huge red flag for a pilot.
He made that point really clearly. As fighter pilots, their job is to know what's in their airspace. Unidentified showing advanced capabilities. Major problem. Doesn't matter the origin adversary, something else entirely. He stressed the U.S. just needs to understand what these things are and how they work.
And that really underscores the basic responsibility of any nation's defense, doesn't it? Identify and understand any potential threats to your airspace, your security. The fact that these remain unidentified, their capabilities unknown, that's a clear challenge to fulfilling that core duty.
No, he also shared some really recent specific sightings, 2022 to 2024, near Langley Air Force Base.
Yeah.
These were quite detailed and honestly a bit unsettling for you to hear about. What did he describe there?
Yeah, starting in 2022, Langley AFB, which is critical, right? It protects the DC airspace. They had multiple incursions, car-sized objects, hovering at low altitude for long periods, making sudden altitude changes, then shooting off over the Atlantic. Then it happened again in 2023, similar pattern. But this time spherical objects and flattened disc-shaped ones. And alarmingly, they were seen hovering not just over Langley, but also over a nearby nuclear facility. A local eyewitness apparently got concerned enough to report it to the FBI.
Wow. And then 2024, it ramps up. A big increase in sightings, not just Langley, but over New Jersey too, and other bases nationwide. He listed Ohio, Texas, California, Mass, New York, PA, Florida. And the Air Force itself testified to something like 350 drone incidents over bases just this year. Drones of unknown type, mission, operator.
That surge across such a wide area, hitting multiple sensitive military sites, it really suggests the potential scale here. And the Air Force acknowledging them as drones, but admitting they don't know what they are. That underscores the challenge in even categorizing these things.
And he made that vital link for you listening between these military encounters and civilian airspace safety. Mentioned regular sightings near big airports, LaGuardia, Portland. That's a huge safety concern for everyone flying. Risk of mid-airs. Plus, he pointed out the policy problems hindering investigation. Unclear authority, limits on using counter-drone tech. It's a roadblock.
Yeah, that inability to effectively investigate because of jurisdictional confusion or tech restrictions, it shows a real gap in our national readiness. How do we understand and respond to this unidentified activity, both in military airspace and the crowded civilian skies we all use?
Okay, so after his main talk at Yale, there was a Q&A that often brings out some really interesting details. Let's unpack some key points from that. One was about the infrared signature on the gimbal video. What was his take on that?
He clarified that the shape you see in IR might not be the object's actual physical shape. It's complex temperature differences, sensor limitations. He noted that being able to manage your IR signature to create that image would itself be very advanced tech. He doesn't think it's a physical aura, more like a temperature gradient the camera picks up.
Makes sense. Another big topic, the stigma around UAP research. What did he see as the main challenges there?
He talked about it being twofold: social stigma and institutional stigma. Socially, it's the whole cultural baggage, right? UFOs, sci-fi, ridicule, people worry about their reputation, especially in aviation, which is very reputation-based. Institutionally, it's been the lack of government resources, lack of prioritization, which has stopped the U.S. innovation engine from really tackling it. He even mentioned old rules that actually penalized commercial pilots for reporting UFOs.
Wow. Okay, what about the sheer number of reports and the potential for false alarms or misidentifications? How did he address that?
He acknowledged that, yeah, as reporting goes up, you'll probably get more noise, false reports, misinterpretations. But he seemed confident that with enough good data, you can filter that out. Use data analysis, machine learning. The key is getting a large enough, reliable data set to work with.
Given all the coastal sightings, Chesapeake Bay Area, etc., the idea of underwater capability came up. What were his thoughts on objects going into or coming out of the water.
It's definitely a common theme, a lot of speculation there. And he said he gets anecdotal reports, objects seen entering or exiting water near Langley, near New Jersey. But from a pilot's perspective, in a fast jet, it's really hard to visually confirm something like that definitively. So while he doesn't have direct proof himself, he acknowledges the reports are credible and it's plausible. He also mentioned, the submarine community is notoriously tight-lipped. Getting confirmation from them is unlikely.
And the theory that maybe these are advanced Chinese drones launched from surveillance ships offshore. Did he rule that out?
He didn't totally rule it out. You always have to consider conventional explanations, but he expressed pretty high confidence that the U.S. can track conventional ships and subs. And based on public statements about the New Jersey incidents, it seems unlikely a massive, easily detectable operation launching lots of car-sized drones went unnoticed. Plus, the logistics of secretly launching and recovering that many sophisticated drones from ships or subs without being seen, that's a huge challenge.
How good are we at tracking things coming into the atmosphere from space?
He said, confidence is high for tracking things with big IR signatures entering from space, think ICBMs. Our missile defense systems are built for that. But tracking slower, smaller objects, things without a big heat signature, that's much harder technically. He did float the theoretical idea of an adversary putting aerial vehicles into orbit for later re-entry as a potential future threat to watch.
International collaboration seems pretty limited. Any efforts underway there?
Some attempts, yeah. Briefings for NATO allies, a UN working group, was proposed but stalled. His nonprofit, Americans for Safe Aerospace, aims to build sister organizations globally. The goal is international data sharing, standard reporting, advocating for policy reform worldwide.
Okay, the big one. Evidence of non-human intelligence. What was his very careful take on that huge question?
He deliberately avoids making definitive statements about origins. He won't speculate directly. Instead, he focuses on the observed capabilities, the flight characteristics that seem way beyond our current tech. He considers these unexplained capabilities evidence of some kind of intelligence at work. But he won't label it extraterrestrial, AI, natural phenomenon we don't get yet, something else. He sticks to the data showing advanced capabilities.
What about the idea of the U.S. military red teaming itself, using advanced drones over places like Langley or New Jersey to test defenses? Likely.
Graves thought that was pretty unlikely, mainly because there's so much international focus now. Revealing classified U.S. tech or gaps publicly would be super sensitive. Plus, there are huge legal and security issues around potentially exposing classified stuff, even accidentally, to your own pilots during exercises.
Getting hold of the raw radar data seems crucial for analysis. Why is that so hard?
Mostly technical and logistical hurdles. The military creates vast amounts of data daily. Raw radar data isn't usually kept long-term. Storage limits, operational needs. Even on the jets, the data cards often get wiped after flights. Routine procedure. And centralized DoD efforts to collect UAP data have had setbacks. Though he did mention the FBI is now allocating resources and collecting data related to national security threats.
Any patterns emerging, correlations with weather, population density?
He said their current data set isn't big enough for strong statistical conclusions on that stuff. But anecdotally, there seems to be a link to military activity areas and nuclear facilities. Sightings are global, though, all altitudes. Doesn't seem tied just to populated areas.
What about civilian sightings that aren't infrared, just visual reports?
Oh yeah, visual sightings are a big part of it. The New Jersey drone reports, for instance, lots of visual confirmation from witnesses, even when IR sensors didn't pick them up easily, which again suggests maybe some advanced signal management. Visible sometimes, hitting from sensors other times.
And the topic that always captures imagination, crash retrieval. Recovered UAP materials or craft. What did Graves say about that?
He called it opening a can of worms. Lots of rumors, speculation, very little verifiable info, especially around New Jersey recently, apparently. But he stated clearly, no direct first-hand knowledge of any confirmed recoveries, government or private. He talked about the general idea of government or civilian tech acquisition, how commercial tech could help, mentioned Jake Barber's claims of civilian retrieval efforts, but stressed he couldn't confirm them. Graves did say he's personally bumped up against things, heard credible accounts, suggesting potential programs might exist, but he doesn't have the full picture.
He even shared a cool historical tidbit. An old newspaper clipping, 1950s, mentioning a Cuban sphere. Said similar shapes pop up in military reports over the years. Spheres, elongated spheres, tic-tacs, seem more common in military reports than the recent cubes. Commercial pilots, though, they report a huge variety. High-altitude lights doing weird moves, close encounters with spheres of light, black triangles, tic-tacs, discs, big black rectangles, saucers, even barbell shapes. It's a real mix.
That consistency of certain shapes, spheres, tic-tacs across decades and different observer types, military, commercial, civilian, it does lend weight to the idea that maybe there's a genuine persistent phenomenon being observed.
And the rumors of tons of unreleased UAP videos and data locked away in government systems.
He thinks so, yeah. Because of the increased attention and official reporting channels now, a lot more UAP data is likely being saved in classified systems. Thousands of photos, videos probably exist, but release, highly unlikely anytime soon. Mostly because the sensor systems used are classified, even if the image itself isn't sensitive, like with the FLIR declassification. Plus, he mentioned new aero security guidelines actually classify the UAP reports themselves now, making disclosure even harder.
How open is the new leadership at Aero, the Pentagon's UAP office? Are they collaborating more?
Seems like the new leadership is showing more willingness to engage with outside groups, like the AIAA. Aero reps are apparently attending AIAA committee meetings now. That's a positive sign. But the Aero director reports to a higher board, which limits their leeway. Graves repeated his idea, move the whole UAP effort out of DoD. Maybe to OSTP, the White House Science Office. His reasoning avoids the conflict of interest of DoD investigating itself, essentially.
The FBI getting involved is new for a lot of people. What's their angle? How resourced are they?
Apparently, it started kind of bottom up. Agents saw national security risks. Now it has HQ support, a national program manager. Focus is national security risk assessment, potential ground control, maybe even WMD links that falls under an FBI directorate. But, he stressed, it's not currently a highly resourced or top priority thing for the FBI.
What about accountability? For the decades of seeming inaction on UAP, who's responsible?
Graves said accountability really depends on what the government knew and for how long. If critical info was withheld from aviation safety, from science, that could have major implications, legal and ethical. He also pointed to the current lack of preparedness, legislative, policy, operational for advanced aerial threats. The New Jersey situation highlighted that, suggests maybe some strategic planning failures in defense.
What worries Ryan Graves most right now, personally and professionally, about UAP?
His main concerns are threefold. 1, foreign nations exploiting the uncertainty around UAP. 2, adversaries potentially understanding this stuff better than the US does. And 3, the clear vulnerability of our airspace to these unknown drone-like incursions.
Looking back, why the lack of progress? Bureaucratic failure? Or just genuine lack of knowledge?
He thinks it's probably a mix. Clearly bureaucratic gaps, poor interagency coordination, look at New Jersey, but also, potentially, long-held classified knowledge hidden away in compartments, highly restricted access. He believes the tech to detect these things likely exists, multimodal sensing, but integrating and deploying that tech effectively needs major improvement.
Do some sightings genuinely seem to defy physics as we know it?
Some observations, yeah. Extreme acceleration, instant direction changes, hypersonic flight with no visible propulsion. They strongly suggest capabilities beyond current science. But, and he kept stressing this, we need much better multi-sensor data for proper scientific analysis. Move beyond just anecdotes.
If you had a golden wish list to fast-track understanding UAP, what's number 1?
Top priority. A fully funded, global, space-based sensor network for real-time awareness of everything. Space debris, adversary satellites, and UAP in the atmosphere. He even put a number on it. Maybe $5 million over 2 years just for initial product development. He also pushes this tri-use model for tech. Develop stuff with applications for commercial, defense, and UAP research.
Any truth to stories of military aircraft trying to engage UAP?
He mentioned some historical accounts, hard to verify, particularly involving Iran. Reports often included system malfunctions on the engaging aircraft, even aircraft loss. But again, verification is tough.
Any exciting projects or VC interest in UAP-related tech he's seeing?
He mentioned his nonprofit's international expansion efforts. He's pushing for a dedicated UAP program office at the National Science Foundation, NSF, to fund relevant basic research. Think materials, propulsion, energy. Also sees the Small Business Administration's Office of Strategic Capital as maybe another way to boost VC investment in relevant dual-use tech.
Okay, lastly, those persistent crash retrieval rumors and how people can follow his work.
Like he said before, no direct knowledge of crash retrieval programs. But he's met people whose experiences hint at possible tangential awareness. Repeated Jake Barber's claims about civilian efforts. To stay updated, go to safeaerospace.org and follow him on X, formerly Twitter. His handle is uncertainvector.
And based on everything he's seen, Any guess at the goal behind these sightings?
Uh,
The motivation.
he really emphasized. With the limited data we have now, guessing motivations is pure speculation. He did note the behavior hovering near military sites. Civilian infrastructure is similar to what adversaries might do for surveillance, but cautioned strongly against jumping to conclusions without way more understanding.
So wrapping this deep dive up, it's undeniable. Ryan Graves' firsthand accounts, his ongoing advocacy, it provides this incredibly crucial, credible lens on the whole UAP issue.
Yeah, what's really striking is his journey, isn't it? From that personal, maybe bewildering pilot experience to becoming such a prominent public voice. And his relentless effort now to bridge that gap between compelling eyewitness accounts and hard objective science.
Absolutely. And through this deep dive, you, the listener, hopefully you've gained real insight.